First and foremost, I am not anti-solar, but I do feel there's a place for it with careful planning and thought. If my information is correct, the Public Service Board has not denied one single solar farm to date. So the message they are sending to developers is that you can put it anywhere, and I mean anywhere. I don't think anyone in this room can say that every site is going to be acceptable. Section 248 of the Title 30 of the Vermont statutes, the law that was enacted to oversee this process, can't be working if no sites have ever been denied. With the amount of open land that we have in this state, these solar farms should be placed with the least amount of impact on our residents. What I think needs to happen is to have a more comprehensive oversight of the entire solar farm industry as a whole. I think the path that the town has started on to try and send a message to those in control to slow down and take into consideration the legitimate concerns we have about the future direction we should be taking in regards to solar development.
Green Mountain Power purchased CV, okay, and dealt with our local people coming down and discussed and tried to accommodate the economic impact. They represented that they would make Rutland the solar capital of the state of Vermont. I'm not sure very many of us understood that projects like this were in the offing. There are smaller projects around the city, around other parts of the community, which aren't as intrusive.
The development and land use planning of any community, certainly ours as well, has been vested for decades to the citizenry of that community, and it is they who have, for those decades, decided what flavor, what ambiance, what view sheds, and what balance of agricultural, commercial, industrial, and residential development to achieve within their community. Reasonable regulation of all of these categories has always been at the heart of local control and has not only been encouraged, but it's been enhanced by wise state policies such as Act 250 and Act 248, which has been your privilege to fairly apply. Our community, Rutland Town, wishes to continue that tradition and that high responsibility. So when faced with a new emerging industry, renewable energy, we sought to do what any responsible governing body would do in the normal course of any development. Faced with the possibility of a completely changed landscape in our town, we sought out reasonable regulatory language and provisions for development of this industry that we felt would be compatible with our citizens' desires, while also attempting to meet the new industry's needs. We asked our administrator, Chosen Galley, to research the topic and provide us with a baseline document, if such was available, that we could modify and adopt as quickly as possible to meet a timeline that was accelerating faster than proper planning should allow. Rutland Town does not oppose solar energy, nor its inclusion in the mix of renewable resources for the benefit of our citizenry. What we do oppose is the thought that any one entity, be it Green Mountain Power, Grow Solar, Rutland Economic Development, or, with all due respect, even the PSB, should have the right to unilaterally determine what our town should look like and what the view sheds of our residential development should be. In that regard, I'm absolutely sure that an overwhelming majority of our townspeople do not want industrial solar along every byway and highway near and adjacent to their neighborhoods. Indeed, adhering to reasonable standards developed by our community as part of the planning process has been the hallmark of both local control and planning policy, which have made Vermont the pride of all our citizenry and the envy of the entire country. For sure, there's a place for industrial solar. As sure as I am of that statement, I'm equally sure that it certainly is not the right of the industry to determine where and how that happens. We oppose any industry having this much power over our 4,000 citizens in a representative democracy. It is, after all, our town.
There's got to be a better place to put it. This seems to me like it will only exacerbate the problem. This is my pet peeve, is the presentation of this project. And not being an adjoining landowner, I was not notified. I had no knowledge. And I'm going to bet a lot of people within just a few feet of me, my neighbors, other than if I hadn't told them about the project, they had no idea. So I blame the city of Rutland. I blame the developer. I think this is a stealth mode. I think this is not the way you want to run any project. I think before this started, I was probably a solar advocate, but not so much anymore, because I think the lack of transparency on this really shows up.
A sprawling 1 megawatt industrial power generation facility of 259 connected ground-mounted racks installed on a significantly sloping site underlain by poorly permeable compact glacial till soils, overlying wetland and wetland buffer zones in an area zoned for single-family residences does not belong in the middle of 4 neighborhoods of Rutland City and Rutland Town. It is possible that a much smaller project, better planned, designed, studied, and properly reviewed, with far fewer environmental, aesthetic, and other impacts, could work at a future time.
I wanted to point out that the property that the solar farm is proposed to go on is single-family residential zoning. It's not multifamily zoning, it's not senior housing zoning, it's single-family residential housing, and it has been that way for many years. At last week's solar hearing for the Cold River Road project, the theme promoted specifically that that project was zoned commercial. That is most definitely not the case here, as you've heard. For years, the state of Vermont has been governed by Act 250 in terms of buildings, building signs, sprawl, etc., to protect from just this sort of project. While I realize that you as the Public Service Board have been granted full authorization to override zoning, and I understand that, it just seems very wrong in this case. Putting solar panel converts this property to a money-making commercial property, one that does not belong nestled among multiple neighborhoods. While most of us do want solar power, we recognize that solar farms belong in commercial settings. Allen Street by the hospital, the old dump off Gleason Road, Route 4, Route 7. In looking at the public impact, the gentleman reported that there is visibility for passersby for 1.2 seconds on Westridge Terrace, but gave no impact for the people that live there 24/7. I couldn't understand why he didn't take that into account until I realized, because he's not used to taking this into account. Solar farms are not put in the middle of residential neighborhoods. I'm certain there are more industrial areas to erect these panels in order to allow Rutland to become the solar capital of New England, but still keep the integrity of our Vermont residential neighborhoods. And one more thing that was said last week at the Public Service Board has so far supposedly not turned down a single residential or single solar project to date. I don't know if that's true or not, but that's what was said. And I feel strongly that this should be the one where we draw the line. A line that shows clearly that not every landowner can put up an investment solar project, and especially not in the midst of residential neighborhoods.
I would like to add also that I am one house removed from where the solar farm is going to be. I have heard nothing about this until one of my neighbors informed me of it. I think that's very delinquent on the parts of the developers, and I'm not sure how many others of my neighbors close nearby this solar farm to be know about it as well.
I am an alderman for the city, and when I was approached about this, unfortunately I knew nothing about it, and upon my research I found that I can do nothing about it, and that's why I knew nothing about it. I was told that municipal zoning does not make a difference. Basically, in regards to solar, it can go where it wants. Basically, I'm paraphrasing, I'm sorry, but basically I was told that it didn't make a difference. It can go wherever it wants to.
Right now, I'm looking at what, an 8-foot high fence or something like that. There's a row of trees there now in the back of my property in Rutland Town, right? And I'm assuming those trees are all going to come out. In this case, I'm looking at an ugly fence and 200 some odd solar panels. I'm not against solar energy at all. You know, the cost benefit of this is certainly to private industry. It's not to the citizens of the county. It's to Rutland Town. and it's going to be an eyesore for me. It's definitely going to affect my property value. It's bad enough that I got tower lines to look at now, and just to worry about. I don't know if I'm going to be able to sell my house if this goes on. Not that I'm looking to sell my house. I've been there since 2000. But we've got a nice piece of property, and this is going to be an eyesore.
I mean, that's just a straight line. You're going to see it all the time. It's just going to be pretty ugly. You know, my kids, my grandkids, I think solar's great. I have no problem with it at all. I see no dollar value to me, only a negative value to property. I agree with solar. You know, I think it's great. It's been done all around. In the right place, I think it's fantastic. You know, if it's not zone residential, why should we even be considering it? Because those zoning rules were put in there not to be changed. When I built my house, I had to have a certain square footage in my area. Those were the covenants. And that can't change today. And I don't think this should change. Definitely not for it at all.
I had concerns on where you wanted to put it, how it was going to affect the appearance of the city, if it's going to be some eyesore we're all going to be cringing at, because if you drive by, you can go Route 7, you go north, you see this big field full of them, and it's like, oh my God.
I hate to see the loss of agricultural land in the town of Sudbury. Once it's gone, you can't make any more. And it's a dramatic loss. These are fields that have been used recently up to last season, I believe. And I hate to see the tone of the town change that dramatically.
I built my house in 1962, and it's set just south of where the panels are going. When I built my house, my view is to the north. And now I'm going to be looking right into those panels. And I just don't really see a sense having to put them near the road or around houses. I've been to Burlington, seen those up in New Haven. I don't think they're too attractive.
Seems like the state is rushing in for putting in these solar panels, and they're kind of ugly, and you know, I'm for solar power, but rushing into putting them in, maybe 10 years from now, technology might make it so you might only need a small tube on your house to bring all the power you need, and we're kind of going full speed ahead on this.
Town of Sudbury established zoning regulations as a means to plan for orderly growth and to minimize impacts of development on abutting neighbors and town services. While there is no commercial district specified in the regulations, the Zoning Board of Adjustment considers applications to establish businesses in town subject to a conditional use permit. And the record shows that the Zoning Board of Adjustment is very pro-business when it comes to granting these permits. Unfortunately, when developers apply for certificates of public good, such as Sudbury Solar, local land use regulations are superseded by the state regs, and the host towns are relegated to a subservient and secondary role, more of an observer status. So now Sudbury is faced with a major project, a 15-acre footprint that dwarfs anything else in our town. There's no way to obscure it from the view by neighbors or travelers. It provides no revenue to the town and precludes any other type of development that could have provided revenue. I see this whole process and project as a quadruple whammy against Sudbury. The developer and the state of Vermont come out winners, but in my opinion, Sudbury loses. While I'm a supporter of solar power in principle, I feel Sudbury is being used and abused in this whole process. It happens that Route 30 corridor is favorable for solar electric projects to tap into the electric transmission grid, so developers target the town, and that's understandable. However, when the town has little or no say in how this project is evaluated and would receive no remuneration for hosting it, the process can only be seen as flawed and unjust.
I see the developing process as one that completely lacks transparency. And I would suspect that the people of Sudbury, if it was put to a vote for renewable energy, there would be a positive vote. They would approve and support renewable energy. But when they look at the process that is happening across the state of Vermont, not just Sudbury, it's easy for us to think our little town might be being picked on, but I think the way the process is moving, and there is dissension amongst other towns, the process, if that were put to a vote, it would be a resounding no. And I would prefer, and obviously this is a legislative issue, more and deeper than the Public Service Board, but it seems as though if the state is going to impose this will, that they should work with the towns instead of above and beyond the towns. And if they did that, I think that the towns could suggest and actually produce a map of their town where these facilities would be most appropriate. And then work with that developer to mitigate that process and to make it a sustainable methodology instead of one where the developer really has all the cards. And that seems to be what's wrong with this particular process. And I think that this particular project for our town, a rural town, is the wrong one. One of the things when we look at what is important to Vermonters is its rural landscape. That is one of the #1 priorities for the state people. Maybe not the state government, but the state's people. And the reason people move here, stay here, is because of that landscape. We need to respect that landscape, and we need to prioritize it.
I'm concerned about the visual impact on this landscape. I think that this is absolutely not the location for a large solar array project. It's a beautiful, beautiful piece of property in a very rural setting, and this is just not the right place for this. I'm completely supportive of solar, but not here.
What's in it for Sudbury? They put this thing in, 15 acres or whatever it is. We know what they look like. They're not horrible, but it's the 21st century. What's in it for Sudbury?
So I'm Board of Selectmen, Chairman of the Board, as another board member here. Not here to represent the board, but anything I have to say is more on a personal level, even though the board at some time, not in formal situations, has discussed this project, and we're totally in agreement with Larry and the Planning Commission's letter of February that Larry spoke of earlier. But I certainly do, in speaking for myself, sympathize with you folks who need to look out at these panels and have to pass them every day, because I don't agree with the whole situation as far as our landscape and our farmland goes. But I just want to know at some point during this whole process that I personally can learn something good that this town will get from this. What benefit is it to us and the town as myself as well?
To me, this is an industrial type of development that is not consistent at all with the town plan, nor is it worth condemning agricultural land.
I liked what, part of what David Cobb said about having a more collaborative process with the town. I think that in a better world, that's the kind of process we'd have. We'd be able to say we support solar energy, and we want to be involved in thinking about the best place to put it that's going to be good for everybody.
My only thing I want to say is for the Public Service Board to please listen to the people. I live in Cornwall, and as everybody in here knows, the big debate over the pipeline. Big business comes into a town, makes promises, they don't always follow. Things have been shuttled around in Cornwall, it's going here, it's going there. There's big money behind that project. And we feel in Cornwall, and I think people in this room feel, you're getting a little strong-armed by big business. And I think it's the Public Service Board to be sympathetic and really take that and think about that, because people's lives, people's properties are affected in both these projects.
Will we be able to get a copy of the proceedings for tonight?
The court reporter is going to transcribe it, and I can't give it away because this is how the court reporters make their living. They sell the transcripts. You can, however, and I know this is going to sound very inconvenient, but it's the way it has to work. you can come to the Public Service Board and review a copy there at no charge. Otherwise, you would need to purchase one from the court reporters.
Oh my God.
Otherwise, the court reporters don't.
I guess I don't understand why, as a host town, we can't get a percentage off from our electric bills just for having it here.
People that wish to participate as parties have to file what's called a motion to intervene, and the deadline for doing that is 1 week from today.
Oh my God. That's not fair.
That particular deadline has been established for quite a while. It's been on the board's website.
I'm the one that probably to get affected the most. My house is borders, my property borders that property. My house, the view from my house is looking north. Now, I would hope that everybody on the board could look at 15 acres of panels behind their house and think what it's going to look like. I'm not against solar, but I think there's got to be better places to put a solar farm that size, beside and back of somebody's house or along Route 30.
Well, I hope in the future that the process would be one of planning forward as opposed to reacting, and that is, as the concept of an industrial park, that areas are selected as more appropriate with the highway, in this case, the power line feed, to have the capacity and agreed designated areas so we can encourage solar power as opposed to having the poison ivy erupt in a location where we don't want it, where it may cause visual harm to the feeling of a community or to individuals that own property. So I would hope that longer term we could find planning designated zones where the least amount of detrimental outcome would be so we can encourage solar power.
Amen, Bill. When I look at this project, I go by here every day from work down to where I buy a lot of my supplies, and it seems like it's just way over the top for where this place is. It's infringing on neighbors. I just can't imagine seeing 9,000 panels out in this field, and when all these neighbors are fighting it, and it's going to take their land values down one way or the other. And yeah, it's good for things, but it just seems like there's better places in Vermont where you can put these and hide them so that everybody doesn't have to see them. I mean, you're not going to see, trees are not going to hide these things, no matter what you do. You can put up, but it just seems too much to me, and I think they need to find, I'm all for it, but find better places where everybody doesn't have to see it and where it's upsetting a lot of people.
I just think we're going too fast. I drive all over the state for my job, from Pownell to Troy, and I see in the past 5 to 7 years these farms popping up left and right. And it takes, for me, it takes the beauty and the aesthetics away from the state that I love. I think we're going too fast, and I think we need to really listen to the people that live in these areas and get a good perspective of, what they have to deal with. Thank you.
Chris Zalisky, Rutland City Board of Aldermen, and I'm here not so much for this specific project. However, I would like to say, as preface, I have been a supporter of solar, and I've been a advocate for the city becoming the solar city in Vermont and marketing itself and helping to develop these types of projects. My big concern as we reach a level of scale in and throughout the city is the aesthetic impact that we have on the city. If these projects are done well, as we all expect and hope, then it's a great opportunity to increase property values, and it's a great opportunity to help Rutland market itself as we redefine who and what we are as a city, and as we continue to build on the energy that we've started to build on here for the last 5 or 10 years. To do that, because of the semi-industrial nature of what these panels look like, we have to do it right in terms of the aesthetic landscaping that goes around and integrates it with the community, goes around the project, integrates it with the community, and helps it develop the community in addition to the pockets of the players who will benefit most from it. So I don't anticipate that we would have to completely cover them up and grow 40-foot evergreens around them. However, simply putting a wire gray broken down looking fence around it is completely not appropriate. So I don't know the plans for this one specifically, but for the one at Charter Hill, for those that have already been developed in the city, for this one, and for any other projects that come up, we have a great opportunity not just to finish it with the solar panels, but to take a community-oriented approach that's going to help increase property values, and that's going to help the city market itself and grow this city. And also, by doing it right in terms of the aesthetic landscape and blending it in with the community, it's going to facilitate members of the community wanting these projects to be further developed, and it's going to do everyone, including the developers themselves, some good. So I hope and expect that with this project, that as you drive around and look at it a year or two from now, that you don't even notice the panels because the landscaping is so effective. And again, it doesn't have to be $50,000 worth of landscaping that completely hides them, but it should integrate them and even improve the looks of the community rather than detract from them. So thank you for your time and consideration.
I think the big frustration for me is that this isn't what it's billed to be. If this was a small-scale Vermont community wind farm where IRA put up 6 towers of a moderate size to generate what little energy IRA needs, and we shared in the risk and financial benefit, and we worked it out amongst our neighbors, I would be able to support a project like that. I think a lot of other people would too. But IRA was chosen not because someone looked at Vermont and said, where's the right place for a big wind project? A big out-of-state land management company who happens to own a bunch of property here and saw a chance to make money said, let's put out a request for proposal to do it here because there's an opportunity. And you know, it's a deal between a out-of-state landowner, a private developer, chosen here based on factors that really have everything to do with money and nothing to do with IRA's really the best place for this. And the scope of the project is based on, well, it needs to be this big, and I understand it's hugely expensive to jump through the hoops you need to jump through to do this, but that doesn't make it the right place or the right scope for this community. And I think, you know, we feel like hapless victims because somebody outside this town owns most of this land, and they're never going to have to look at it. They're never going to have to explain themselves to those of us that do. And we end up feeling like, you know, it's all this big money, big business, big energy, and can they convince the 3 members on the Public Service Board? And what, you know, we would never allow this kind of development for any other purpose. If they were 40 sculptures that big, or smokestacks, or houses, or any other development on the ridge, you know, IRA would never allow it. But because it's an energy project, we can't fight it with zoning or anything else. We're at the mercy of the 3 members of the Public Service Board and, you know, whatever thoughts or feelings the developers have or the company that owns the land. So we're screwed. Our opinions ultimately don't matter. And that's really frustrating.